Welcome back. Tonight we enter a soft and sleepy journey through history, meant to cradle you in calm from the very first moment. You find yourself easing into the entrance of a Paleolithic shelter as a slow drizzle filters through the forest canopy outside. The air is cool, the scent of wet leaves drifting in with you. The dimness settles gently, and as your eyes adjust, a soft red dust seems to hover in the still air ochre, ground patiently by hands long gone. Somewhere deeper in the shelter, you hear a faint grinding sound, rhythmic and unhurried, like someone smoothing time itself. And honestly, with how dreamy and slow everything feels, you probably won't survive this story awake. As the calm settles in, you can like and subscribe if you'd like. This little corner of history is always here when you need rest. And before the quiet pulls you too deep, feel free to share your city and local time below. It's always comforting seeing where listeners drift in from. Now dim the room, relax your shoulders, and let's begin this slow walk into the past together. The air inside the shelter carries a hushed weight, almost as if every sound arrives wrapped in a thin blanket. You take slow steps forward, careful not to disturb the red-tinted dust that coats the ground. A smooth stone sits on a flat slab ahead of you, your callback for this moment rounded by centuries of steady grinding. It looks almost warm, as though it remembers the touch of hands that shaped it. You reach toward it, brushing your fingers lightly along its curve. The stone feels cool, smoother than you'd expect, like a river pebble placed here on purpose. Historians still debate whether these stones were used mostly for practical pigment making or for ceremonial preparation. Some even suggest prehistoric people may have prepared ochre mixtures for their skin, their tools, or perhaps for marking significant places. You lean into the mystery, amused at the idea of early humans giving themselves prehistoric spa treatments with red clay, long before beauty routines required fancy bottles. As you settle beside the grinding stone, the slow rhythm becomes clearer. It's not loud, just a soft, circular whisper, like sand brushing against slate. You imagine early humans kneeling here, leaning over the slab, patiently crushing small ochre nodules with practiced hands. The steady motion probably felt familiar, maybe even soothing, much like someone today kneading bread dough to clear their thoughts. Except instead of bread, they were crafting one of the earliest colors humanity ever loved. Talk about starting the art world on hard mode. You let yourself observe how the dust catches what little light filters in from the shelter entrance. It hangs in the air like faint red mist, settling slowly across your clothes and hands. The forest rain outside patters gently, its sound blending with the grinding, forming a quiet duet of nature and human craft. It's the type of ambiance that would make you subscribe to a 10-hour loop of it without hesitation. A small crack of thunder rolls far in the distance. Not sharp, just a deep and comfortable hum. You shift slightly, taking in the earthy smell rising from the walls. These shelters often held moisture, their interiors shaped by centuries of seasonal rain. The red powder, the stone slab, and the shallow bowls scattered around hint at a routine older than language, daily life expressed through color. You picture early humans gathering here as the rain intensified outside, working calmly while others prepared food or tended to small fires. Maybe a child sat nearby watching the pigments swirl like tiny storms in shallow water bowls. Maybe someone joked about the way red dust stuck to everything. Even then, humor probably made long nights shorter. You smile slightly at the thought of someone 40,000 years ago complaining, this stuff gets everywhere," proving that some things never change. You notice the rhythmic grinding slows, then quiets completely. The shelter returns to its gentle stillness, as though giving you space to breathe. The smooth stone on the slab remains where you touched it, resting, waiting, remembering. You take a deeper breath, letting the soft sound of the rain fold into you. The red earth, the patient craft, the dim shelter, everything blends into a single, calming moment. Not much moves here, not much changes, and maybe that's why it feels so peaceful. You stay still, feeling the weight of the quiet settle over your thoughts, softening them one by one. And with the grinding stone resting beside you, the space feels like it's opening into the next chapter of this ancient routine. The rain outside continues its slow descent, each drop tapping gently against leaves, stone, and soil. You sit deeper inside the shelter now, your back resting against a cool wall shaped by centuries of weather and quiet human presence. A faint line of ochre dust trails from the grinding slab toward a deeper alcove, almost like breadcrumbs inviting you forward. The callback settles in your mind, the smooth grinding stone from before, its shape still lingering in your palm. You let your eyes adjust to the darker space ahead. The dimness isn't threatening, it's soft, velvety, like a thick blanket draped over the atmosphere. The sound anchor shifts from the grinding rhythm to the hushed drip of rainwater collecting on the shelter's lip, then falling in slow, steady drops. The acoustics here soften everything, turning even the smallest sound into a distant whisper. As you move slowly along the wall, your fingers lightly brushing the textured surface, you feel variations in the stone. Some patches are rough and uneven. Others are unexpectedly smooth, possibly worn down by countless hands leaning or pressing against the same spot over generations. There's a quiet comfort in imagining that your fingertips trace the same path as people who lived tens of thousands of years before you. You could call it prehistoric networking, except no one exchanged business cards. In a shallow recess, you notice subtle streaks of red and black pigment, faint but unmistakable. Some historians think they were made accidentally transfer marks from hands coated in ochre or charcoal. Others argue these were deliberate early markings, maybe symbolic, maybe practical, maybe something in between. The debate continues, of course, because early humans did not leave helpful sticky notes saying, "This was art," or "This was Thursday's hunting schedule." As you observe the pigments, the smell of damp earth grows stronger. It's a deep, mineral scent, mixed with the faint iron tang of ochre. You inhale slowly. The air feels grounded, ancient, like it holds the memory of past rains and distant fires. A small object catches your eye near the alcove floor, a rounded pebble, different from the grinding stone, but equally smooth. You lift it gently. It fits perfectly in your palm, cool and weighty. Some archaeologists believe stones like this were used as hammering tools or for breaking ochre nodules. Others suggest they could have been personal objects carried from place to place, maybe even attached to identity or ritual. In other words, your pebble might be a tool, or someone's prehistoric emotional support rock. You place the pebble back where you found it, its surface catching the faintest bit of filtered light. Around it, shallow grooves in the floor hint at repeated occupation. This wasn't a place visited once. It was part of a routine, a pattern, a rhythm of life played out softly and steadily over many lifetimes. The wind outside shifts direction, sending a cooler draft into the shelter. It brushes your skin like a passing thought, fleeting but noticeable. You pull your hands closer to you, rubbing your fingertips gently as if warming them. Early humans likely did the same, drawing their furs tighter around their shoulders, leaning closer to each other during long, wet seasons. You listen again. The rain's rhythm has changed slightly, not faster, just deeper, as if the droplets have grown heavier. It mixes with the distant rustle of wind through trees. You imagine the forest beyond massive trunks, thick undergrowth, and the subtle glow of moss catching droplets like tiny lanterns. Out there, the world moves endlessly. In here, everything slows to the softest possible pace. You glance back toward the grinding stone from the previous section, its memory lingering like a steady pulse. The smooth pebble in this alcove feels like its quieter sibling, another small fragment of a larger story about human hands shaping their world. slowly and patiently. Your mind drifts to a modern aside. People today still gather pigments, though usually in fancy tubes with names like Crimson Horizon or Burnt Ember. No. 7. Early humans would probably laugh or maybe feel proud that their little dusty tradition led to entire art stores where people can spend 45 minutes debating between two nearly identical shades of red. A soft drip echoes from somewhere deeper in the shelter. You move toward it at a gentle pace, letting curiosity pull you forward. The floor becomes slightly uneven, the rocks underfoot scattered like tiny landmarks. Farther in, a narrow crack in the wall reveals a slow trickle of rainwater, threading its way downward. The droplets form a tiny pool at the base, rippling calmly, each ripple expanding until it touches the surrounding stones. You kneel beside it, watching the ripples smooth out. The surface catches your reflection, a faint outline, blurred by the shifting water. Maybe early humans did the same, glimpsing their own reflection in shallow pools. Some scholars believe such moments might have inspired ritual or symbolic thinking. Others argue it was just a neat visual effect. Either way, it's soothing, like watching a screensaver before screensavers existed. The alcove grows quieter, the air thicker with moisture. The faint red tint on the walls seems to deepen. You feel the calm settling into your shoulders, your breath matching the slow rhythm of the drips. This gentle pool, the rounded pebble, the streaks of pigment, they all mark another layer of life inside this Paleolithic shelter, another soft step in your journey. And from here, the path continues deeper still. You move deeper into the shelter, each slow step carrying you farther from the sound of the rain outside. The air shifts gradually cooler, stiller, with a faint mineral scent that seems to rise from the stone itself. Your fingertips trail along the wall again, but here the surface changes. Instead of smooth curves shaped by human touch, the stone feels uneven, rippled, as though ancient water once carved pathways through it long before anyone ground ochre or sheltered from storms. Ahead, a faint glow seeps in from a narrow opening high above, not enough to illuminate the space fully, but enough to form soft silver shapes on the floor. Your eye follows them, irregular patches of light that move gently as the wind shifts outside. The pale patterns stretch over stones, debris, and something more deliberate. A cluster of flat slabs arranged in a nearly circular formation. You walk slowly toward them, the rhythm of your steps softened by the sandy ground. The circle feels intentional, though its purpose remains unclear. Some archaeologists think such formations in Paleolithic shelters marked areas for tool-making or food preparation. Others argue they were gathering spots, simple places for families or groups to sit close together. And, of course, some believe they held deeper meaning, perhaps ritualistic, though no one can prove it. The stones refuse to explain themselves, which feels oddly polite of them. You lower yourself gently onto the nearest slab, its surface cool and comforting against your palms. Sitting here, the circle creates a strange sense of quiet focus, as though the space itself is listening. You settle into the stillness, breathing slowly as faint echoes from the entrance fade into a soft background hum. Near your feet, thin scratch marks etch the stone, small, irregular, perhaps made by sharp tools. They run in short parallel lines, reminiscent of tally marks. Some scholars think early humans used such markings for counting or tracking tasks. Others propose they were simply the byproduct of shaping tools, like the Paleolithic equivalent of accidental desk scratches. Either way, the scratches offer their own kind of quiet company, proof that this stone once echoed with soft, purposeful movements. Something glints faintly nearby. You reach out slowly and brush aside a thin layer of dust. Your fingers find a tiny fragment of bone, lightweight, smooth at one end, and carved just enough to suggest deliberate shaping. Perhaps it was once part of an awl or a small decorative object. Historians still debate whether tools like this were purely practical or also carried personal meaning. You imagine someone sitting right where you are now, humming softly, shaping this bone while listening to rain nearly identical to the rain outside today. Funny how not much changes humans still fidget with objects while thinking, planning, or trying not to fall asleep during long meetings. As you hold the bone fragment, another sensory layer emerges, the faint, metallic smell of ancient stone mixed with the dry scent of old bone. It's subtle but grounding, drawing you further into the quiet atmosphere of the shelter. You place the fragment back carefully, letting it rest exactly where it was, a respectful nod to the silent craftsman who once held it. The wind outside shifts again, sending a soft, low whistle through the narrow opening up above. The sound echoes in gentle waves, bouncing lightly around the circular stone arrangement. The acoustics here make even the simplest noise feel thoughtful, as if the shelter itself is humming along with the breeze. Your eyes drift toward the walls around the circle. Here, the pigment marks you saw earlier grow more varied. Faint smudges of ochre mix with occasional charcoal streaks. These marks are more chaotic, less patterned than those near the entrance. Some researchers believe such clustered pigment traces came from processing materials pounding ochre nodules against stone, blending powders with fat or water, preparing mixtures for art, body decoration, or durable adhesives. Others argue they might simply be stains from hands touching the walls after long days of work. You imagine prehistoric parents saying, "Please stop touching the walls, those are freshly painted." And suddenly the entire timeline feels more relatable. The callback to the first grinding stone returns subtly in your mind, the steady rhythm of grinding echoed here in the scattered pigment traces. Everything feels connected, like threads of quiet activity woven into the shelter's body. The longer you sit in the circle, the more the atmosphere deepens. You feel the temperature shift slightly as a cool breeze moves across the floor. The sensation is soft, almost like someone slowly brushing past you. It settles into your skin, a gentle reminder of the world outside the rain, the trees, the endless cycles of weather and time. You let your gaze soften, observing the subtle interplay of dim light and shadow. The shadows shift with the breeze, pooling in the recesses and then stretching across the floor like slow-moving ink. They don't hide anything. They simply soften everything, creating an atmosphere that invites rest. You imagine the people who once sat here, maybe families grinding ochre, shaping tools, sharing food. Maybe someone told long, quiet stories, their voice low and steady, the same way you hear soft narrations today when you're trying to sleep. Humans have always found comfort in slow stories. Some things don't evolve as much as we think. Your thoughts drift lazily, matching the gentle pulse of distant raindrops. The shelter seems to breathe with you, inhaling the cool air, exhaling the faint warmth of the circle. A final whisper of wind brushes your cheek, as if nudging you deeper into the shelter's history. You rise slowly, taking one more moment to observe the stone circle, the scratch marks, the pigments, the little bone tool. Everything here feels purposeful yet peaceful. And ahead, another chamber waits. You move deeper into the shelter, letting the soft dimness guide you toward a narrower passage. The air shifts again, becoming cooler, almost cold enough to feel like a thin veil brushing over your arms. You walk slowly, your fingertips trailing along the wall to keep balance, the stone surface gently textured beneath your touch. The faintest echo accompanies each careful step, as if the shelter is repeating your movements just a moment behind you. The passage opens into a wider pocket of space, unexpectedly tall, with a ceiling arching upward like a natural dome. Here, the air feels stiller, heavier, almost insulated from the outside world. A soft, atmospheric hum lingers, created by the distant rainfall threading its way through cracks and crevices above. The sound gathers in this chamber, blending into a low, constant murmur that feels almost like breath. Your attention drifts toward the ground, where the earth appears smoother, flattened by repeated use. You lower yourself until you are nearly at eye level with the floor in spot patterns, not drawn or carved, but pressed. Repeated, curved impressions appear faintly in the dust. They resemble the shapes of seated bodies, where people might have rested, worked, or simply existed in silence. It's strangely comforting to know that ground long before you held the weight of others in almost the same positions. Historians still debate what this chamber truly was. Some propose it was a dedicated mixing area for pigments, protected from wind so powders wouldn't scatter. Others believe it served as a quiet refuge for certain communal tasks, food sorting, tool repair, or quiet conversations. And then, of course, there are theories about early ritual spaces, though evidence remains thin. You smile faintly at how archaeologists try to guess the purpose of a room without ever being able to ask its former occupants. It's like trying to understand a modern teenager's bedroom from leftover socks. Against one wall, something different catches your eye. A shallow groove carved into the stone, running horizontally for several feet. You approach slowly, letting your fingers trace its length. The groove feels purposefully shaped, smooth at the bottom, worn at the edges. A tool-sharpening channel, perhaps, or the rail where long objects were rested, spears, poles, or grinding slabs. Or maybe it once held a line of embers or smoldering plant matter that created smoke for some practical purpose. No one can say with certainty. The shelter, as always, keeps its secrets politely vague. A soft crunch under your heel draws your attention downward. You shift your weight slowly and crouch. Beneath your foot lies a cluster of tiny fragments, flakes of stone, sharp-edged and pale, napping debris. The discarded remains of tool-making. You lift one piece between your fingers. It's small, no bigger than your fingernail, but thin and razor-edged. A clear product of precise, practiced movements. Someone once sat right where you now stand, striking stone against stone in steady rhythms, maybe talking, maybe humming, maybe silently concentrating, the way you do when you're assembling furniture and pretending you don't need the instructions. You place the flake back gently, letting it settle into the shallow indentation where it previously lay. This chamber, more than any other, seems to hold the imprint of skill hands, shaping tools, hands mixing pigments, hands touching stone with purpose. You straighten slowly, taking a deep breath. The air here smells faintly of cool minerals, dust, and something almost metallic. The sensory anchor settles deeply into your awareness, an atmosphere thick with quiet concentration. A place where early humans must have listened intently to the sounds their hands created. The soft tap of stone, the brush of pigment, the whisper of breath in a cold chamber. Your gaze drifts upward. A sliver of pale light descends from a thin shaft in the ceiling, dust particles drifting lazily through it. The particles move so slowly they seem suspended, floating like tiny seeds of memory that never settle. It's strangely soothing, like watching snow fall in slow motion. One larger particle catches your eye, a bit of ochre dust, maybe from earlier work in the shelter. As it drifts downward, it glows faintly in the slanted beam of light, spinning gently before landing near the groove in the stone. The callback stirs the earlier memory of grinding pigment returning softly, naturally. Everything in the shelter feels linked, as though pigments, tools, and human presence threaded themselves together over thousands of years. You take another slow step, deeper into the chamber, moving toward a darker recess. The darkness here is velvety, quiet, not threatening but enveloping. When you reach out, your hands brush faint, relief-like textures on the stone, curved shapes, lines. Not art, exactly nothing recognizable, but the kind of incidental patterns created by repeated contact. Sweat, oils, pigment, time, even something as simple as leaning a shoulder against the wall, day after day, leaves a trace. One indentation, however, is unusual. It's smooth, cup-like, as though intentionally shaped. You run your fingers along the inner curve. This small depression might have been a mixing bowl, carved directly into the stone. Or perhaps a lamp socket, where a bit of animal fat once burned with a dim, flickering flame. Some scientists argue these cup marks had symbolic functions. Others maintain they were strictly utilitarian. As usual, no unanimous conclusion exists. Paleolithic humans didn't leave footnotes. You step back slowly, taking in the chamber as a whole. Everything feels close, personal, like a place for hands more than eyes. A place for creation, slow, thoughtful creation, the kind that requires stillness and focus. A faint draft enters again, brushing your hair, stirring dust in slow spirals. You listen to the distant drip of water echoing from further inside the shelter. Each drop falls with a long, patient pause between impacts. The rhythm feels timeless, almost meditative. You breathe with it. Drop. Inhale. Pause. Exhale. Drop. The chamber seems to pulse with its own heartbeat, steady, muted, ancient. You turn your head toward the sound. Another passageway waits deeper inside, promising yet another quiet corner of Paleolithic life. And so, with unhurried steps, you begin to drift toward it. You step slowly into the next passage, letting the faint sound of water guide your movements. The air cools further as you enter, settling against your skin like a thin, gentle mist. Even your breath seems to soften here, shaping itself to match the hush of the deeper shelter. You move carefully, one slow step at a time, your hand gliding along the stone wall to keep balance as the path subtly curves inward. The darkness gradually lightens, and you find yourself in a space that feels almost like a hidden alcove, round, intimate, the ceiling lower than before. A thin beam of filtered light falls through a crack overhead, scattering across the floor in soft, trembling patterns. Somewhere beyond the walls, rain continues to weave its quiet rhythm, and faint river sounds merge with it, less a noise and more a soft vibration under your feet. As your eyes adjust, you notice something immediately. The ground here is colored, not naturally, at least not entirely. The earth bears stains of deep red and warm brown tones, powdered into soft patches that look like the remnants of repeated pigment grinding. You kneel slowly beside one patch and slide your fingertips across it. The texture is velvety, lighter than sand, easily disturbed into a thin haze when touched. A callback stirs gently in your mind, the earlier glimpses of ochre flakes, the grinding stone, the drifting dust. Everything seems to thread together. A bit of ochre settles on your fingertips. You outstretch your hand toward the narrow beam of light, watching tiny flecks shimmer as they cling to your skin. It feels strangely magical, like you're catching the last glowing dust of a sunset. You imagine Paleolithic artists sitting right where you now sit, mixing pigments, preparing colors with slow, patient motions, maybe humming softly, maybe tapping stone tools in quiet rhythms, maybe complaining about someone borrowing the good grinding slab and not putting it back because some behaviors probably never changed across 40,000 years. Near the wall, you notice a curious arrangement of flat stones. They're stacked loosely, but purposefully 3 on one side, 2 on the other, with a small gap in between. The stones look like they were once used as surfaces for grinding, their tops smoothed by long-term abrasion. One stone even has a shallow indentation where pigment once pooled. But something unusual sits on top of the highest stone. A pale, rounded object, half cracked. You lean forward slowly. The object is an old shell, likely a marine shell from miles away. Historians still debate why such shells appear inland in Paleolithic shelters. Trade? Migration? A simple personal keepsake carried by someone who once loved the shoreline. A lot of researchers propose symbolic significance, while others believe humans simply thought shells looked cool, a relatable instinct. You imagine someone from this shelter, long ago, holding this very shell, maybe admiring its curved lines the same way you are now. You lift it gently. It's surprisingly smooth, lighter than you expect. Inside, faint traces of red pigment cling to the inner surface. Was it used as a mixing bowl, a storage container, a decorative piece, or perhaps the earliest form of a really stylish paint palette? You smile softly at the thought. You set the shell back carefully, aligning it exactly as you found it. A sense of quiet respect follows the motion, as though touching even a single object connects you to someone who sat here tens of thousands of years ago. Around the alcove, subtle markings appear on the walls, not drawings, but smudges, fingerprints, faint streaks of pigment brushed on accident or on purpose. Many Paleolithic shelters show similar traces. Some archaeologists argue that even casual hand streaks were a meaningful part of rituals, teaching moments, or group communication. Others argue they were simply the byproduct of messy pigment preparation. It's hard not to imagine someone wiping their hands clean on the wall while saying, "Ugh, this stuff gets everywhere," because history is nothing if not consistent. You shift your weight slowly, standing again, and notice another detail near the floor. A tiny cluster of pebbles, arranged in a short arc. Their colors vary reddish, brownish, a few darker ones mixed in. You crouch again and place your hand above them, letting your palm hover. They form a gentle curve, almost like a semicircle. No clear purpose, no clear message, yet the placement feels intentional. Maybe this was the boundary of a working area, or a child's play pattern. There's evidence children often left subtle traces in shelters. Or maybe someone simply liked arranging stones neatly. People who organize desk items compulsively would probably understand. The sensory anchor of this space envelops you fully now. The faint mineral scent, the powdery ochre, the cool stones under your fingertips. Everything feels softened, muted, like sound wrapped in cloth. The alcove creates a pocket of calm even deeper than the larger chambers. A slow draft enters the space again from the narrow opening behind you. It brushes your hair and carries a delicate mixture of scents, rain-soaked earth from outside, cool stone, and something faintly metallic. You breathe in deeply, feeling your ribcage expand in the quiet. As you exhale, the beam of light flickers ever so slightly, shifting as clouds pass overhead. The pigment on the floor glows softly, as though the alcove itself is exhaling with you. You take a final slow step backward, letting your heel gently press into the earth. The powders settle behind you in a muted puff, barely rising. Ahead, another corridor curves gently deeper into the shelter, promising a quieter, darker space, waiting to cradle the soft hum of ancient work. With your palm brushing the wall for guidance, you move toward it, letting the alcove fade behind you like a memory settling into dust. You move slowly into the final chamber, letting the sound of distant rain thin into a faint, silvery hush. The air grows cooler still, gathering around you like a soft veil. Each step feels quieter than the last, cushioned by a thin layer of ancient dust settled across the floor. You trace your fingertips along the wall again, following its gentle curve until the corridor finally widens into the heart of the shelter, its deepest, quietest room. Here, the ceiling dips low enough that you instinctively bow your head, moving carefully, almost reverently. Your breathing softens without effort. The darkness feels warmer, as if the walls have been holding on to the memory of countless small fires lit by those who came before you. A faint scent lingers, dry earth mixed with something mineral and smoky, like the ghost of a long extinguished ember. As your eyes adjust, you notice shapes on the wall. Not dramatic paintings, no sweeping horses or mammoths, but small, deliberate marks, short strokes, subtle impressions. Some are vertical, some diagonal, a few arranged in a faint cluster. They look almost like tally marks, or maybe practice strokes for pigment work. Historians still debate whether these served symbolic meaning, counting, teaching, or simply the artistic equivalent of doodles, while waiting for someone to finish mixing ochre in a shell bowl. Humans, after all, have always been prone to scribbling during slow moments. You take a slow step closer, watching the marks shimmer just slightly where the last of the filtered light from the corridor catches them. The pigment here is the same warm red as the patches in the alcove. Your earlier callback rises gently, reminding you of the grinding stones, the dust on your fingertips, the shell with its faint residue. Everything woven through this shelter connects, dust to stone, stone to wall, wall to the quiet people who shaped this place long before you arrived. Near the floor, you notice another familiar shape, a small arc of stones, echoing the earlier semicircle you found. This one is more complete, forming nearly a full ring, though a small opening faces the entrance. You kneel slowly, brushing your hand lightly across the stones. They're smooth, their edges softened by time. Whether ritual, play, or practicality, their intentional placement hums with meaning known only to those who once lived here. You sit for a moment, letting the hush settle. The sensory anchor sharpens, the coolness of the stone beneath you, the faint metallic tang of ochre dust still clinging to your fingers, the steady background murmur of rain threading itself through distant cracks in the rock. Everything folds into the soft atmosphere of this hidden space. You imagine someone from tens of thousands of years ago, kneeling in this same spot, maybe grinding pigment, maybe teaching a child how to mix powder with water from the river outside, maybe resting after a long walk through the valley. You can almost picture their gentle movements, slow and practical, the way they might have glanced toward the cave mouth to check the weather, the way they might have smudged pigment on the wall absent-mindedly while thinking, creating those very marks you now examine. A quiet joke slips into your thoughts somewhere in deep prehistory. Someone probably groaned, "Not more rain," in exactly the same tone people do today. Certain complaints seem carved into the human timeline itself. Another thought drifts in as your fingers hover above the pigment marks. What if these weren't marks at all, but the earliest form of someone trying to teach perspective, shading, or technique? Art teachers have existed as long as students have been frustrated by instructions like, "Make it more dynamic." Somewhere in this shelter, you imagine a Paleolithic mentor patiently saying, "No, no, the line goes this way," while a student sighs dramatically. Some dynamics are timeless. You breathe in deeply, letting the stone's coolness fill your lungs. Then exhale slowly, releasing tension you didn't realize you were still carrying. The deeper chamber almost seems to pulse with its own quiet rhythm, your breath in, the rains whisper out. It's a place of endings and beginnings, a place where the pigments were prepared, where the grinding stones once sang in soft circular motion, a place where walls recorded the earliest flickers of thought. And now, for a moment, you've joined that chain, even if only by brushing your fingers through dust that someone once crushed with care. The chamber seems to dim slightly as a cloud moves overhead, softening even the faintest reflections. You stand slowly, letting your hand drift along the curved wall one last time. The cool surface holds steady beneath your palm. When you turn toward the corridor, the quiet follows you, settled deep, gentle, lingering. The shelter fades behind you as you step into a softer world, one made not of stone and ochre, but of quiet, drifting calm. Imagine the night settling around you like a deep blanket, the air cool and steady, carrying only the lightest breath of rain. The world slows. Even your thoughts begin to loosen, like knots gently unwinding with each exhale. You find yourself near a shallow pool formed by the evening rain. Its surface is perfectly still, a smooth mirror reflecting a faint glow from the clouds overhead. When you lower yourself beside it, the ground feels warm in places, cool in others, holding the last traces of the day. You rest your hands against the earth and let the quiet seep into you. Ripples begin to form not from movement, but from the soft tapping of distant droplets falling from leaves high above. Each ripple widens gently, rings upon rings, drifting outward until they vanish into smoothness again. You watch them, letting their rhythm lull you deeper into stillness. Your breath finds that same rhythm, widening, softening, disappearing. Thoughts drift like small leaves on the water, floating gently before dissolving into the surface. You don't need to follow any of them. You don't need to hold on to anything at all. The air grows thicker, warmer, as though the world is leaning closer to keep you safe. Shadows stretch softly across the pool, blending into one another until there are no edges left, only shapes that drift and settle like dreams forming. You let your shoulders drop, your hands relax, your eyelids grow heavier with each slow breath. The night is steady, the earth is calm, and you are ready to drift.